women are and continue to be exploited in the West. And you look at the advertising industry. I remember 2 or 3 years ago we'd shown a picture of a tractor. Now I know that they must be very difficult to sell unless you're a father or you, for whatever reason, want a tractor. But there was a woman completely naked sitting on this tractor. And I thought, why would you do that? Why would you put a naked woman on a tractor? You know, it's just, to me, a sheer exploitation. I'm sure that there are many of you, Muslims, non-Muslims, who find some advertising images today really quite offensive in the way that they exploit the female form. So, that's me and my hijab, and I mentioned smoking before. This is better than any nicotine patch, because I used to smoke, and when I did start wearing my hijab, I noticed people would rub a neck if I lit up, and I began to think, yeah, it does look awful. I suppose it's a bit like seeing a nun standing there smoking. And so I stopped smoking in public. The smoking laws make it impossible to smoke in the workplace. And eventually, the only place that I felt that I could smoke was at home. And then I got married, and my husband knows better than to say, give an order. Every time we do have anything where my husband gives me an order, I'll say, and what Islamic faith is that on? Because people say, oh yes, when you marry, you become a Muslim and you marry a Muslim man and you have to obey them. I'm saying yes, within an Islamic context. If you told me to take a running jump off a cliff, I would take any notice of them. And we do have some interesting discussions in our house. But as I say, he would never turn around and say, stop smoking. But he, a couple of times, got coughed. And in the end, I just got over the hand with it and just gave up smoking. But as I say, it all started because I put on a hijab. The niqab is a really hot issue. I mean, I've discussed before about the issue of false marriages. The niqab has been described as an oppressive veil, a veil which subjugates and oppresses women. It's a sign of a woman who doesn't have a mind of her own. And I started looking into the niqab. There are probably less than 3,000 women in the Muslim communities in Britain who wear the niqab. And the majority that I have met are white Western converts, so they haven't brought it in as some sort of cultural garment. The women that I've met who wear the niqab tell me that they choose to wear it because they feel it brings them close to God, and why should somebody be criticized for their desire to do that? Why should somebody be criticized for their piety? I was listening to a report on BBC Radio 4 a couple of months ago by their correspondent in Paris, Imogen Kirby, and of course the niqab is a really hot issue in France. All the politicians, the male politicians, have made it center stage. She couldn't find a niqabi or a woman who wears a niqab in Paris, and she went into the traditional Muslim areas in Scotland, quite a few women, and said, do you know anyone who wears a niqab? And they couldn't find anyone. She, she was honest enough to say that she couldn't find anyone. So it's not a huge problem. So why was it take center stage? I would say it was take center stage because these politicians were wanting to use right wing that operates in France and play up to that. And unfortunately, the politics of race and fear have been played in this country. And not too far away from here, just down the road in Oldham, the race minister, Phil Willis, he made a big issue about cousins marrying first cousins. And I thought this should be a conversation he should be having with the royal family, not with me. And the way he was talking, the elephant in the living room that nobody talks about, this terrible problem, first cousins marrying first cousins, and they have these children and they're deformed. The way he was talking and the way the media picked up on it, you would imagine that there were Frankenstein maternity wards right across the Midlands. And in fact, what he was saying was absolute nonsense and had no scientific basis. There was a study, an extensive study done recently in Australia, in which they said the risk of having a child with any sort of deformities was no more higher in first cousins than it would be in women over 40. So really, it was it was the politics of fear and playing the race card, and I just felt it was disgraceful that Phil Willis did that. Now, he did that in the last general election, and basically because the war in Iraq was such a hot issue, the think tanks in Labour have basically pulled him aside and said, Phil, sorry, you're not going to make it in the next general election, the Iraqi war, no, you're finished. Sorry. So what he did, he played to the far right. He knew he wouldn't get any votes from the Muslim community, so he played the race card. And it worked. And he got re-elected. And suddenly, all the Labour statisticians started tearing up the work that they'd done and started looking at what he'd done. And before you knew it, Labour politicians were coming out, bashing at the Muslim community to go up in the polls. And I think that this is something that you might witness in this forthcoming election. Another big myth is, around women and women's education in Islam. And this is something that, I'm ashamed to say, 10 years ago I could have walked into this room and looked around and just, as everyone wearing a scarf, I would thought, look at these poor subjugated women, how on earth did they chain themselves to the kitchen sink and get here to listen to this lecture. Now I'm looking round at all of the women, all my sisters of faith and no faith, and what I see is a remarkable diverse community. What I see are doctors and lawyers and students and women who have a great desire to be educated.